Hello, hello. Testing 1, 2, testing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Do you wanna stand on the chairs on the stairs so we have the
Fall down and I come
same height? Sure. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. This is working. Please come in and find a seat. I was noticing, on Sunday mornings we get up here and do worship, and everybody's seated over here, and it makes you feel like the whole church is going to go like this. But today, you guys are getting us back into balance. So it's wonderful to see you all. I'm just going to open us up with a prayer and then turn this over to Anne and our wonderful speaker. So the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Oh, gracious God, thank you for opportunities to gather together and share the friendship and fellowship we have here in this community. Thank you also for opportunities to learn more about things that are very important to us and to our world and to our children and their children. We thank you especially today for this program and ask that you help us to be shaped and formed by it in ways that are compassionate and caring and loving for all that you have given us and all that you have made. In Christ's name, amen. Okay. Good. Welcome, everyone. Sorry, like this? No, I think maybe it's not on. Okay, here we go. Welcome, everyone, and it's my pleasure and privilege to have Jalal here today to bring him for you all to meet, because I've had the privilege of knowing him since he was a Fulbright Scholar at USC 8 years ago. Yeah, quick math. Yeah, 2014 at USC in the engineering school, and he got his master's degree at that time. One of the programs we do with our Fulbright Scholars, I as the organizer of the enrichment program, is to go to the RAND Corporation, which is represented here today by Lynn. There she is. Yeah, 40 years at RAND. And I've been associated with RAND for many, many years also in other ways. But we go to RAND for Fulbright Scholars to meet their scholars and sometimes work together with them, and also meet the grad students. And that was very successful with Jalal, because he decided he would like to come back and be a grad student at RAND, which he is now. Oh, sorry. Louder. Okay, I'll repeat that last sentence. So from our Fulbright visit to RAND as an enrichment program, Jalal made the decision he wanted to come back to RAND, to the graduate school, which he did, and he's there now, and he's about to graduate. When I met him as a Fulbright Scholar, I thought, aha,
Jalal, you're going to be the Prime Minister of Pakistan. But he's chosen another path for the moment, and he's going to contribute a lot to the world in his present chosen path, which he will tell you all about today.
Thank you so much.
I'd just like to say also that he comes from a wonderful family. 2 of his sisters have visited and stayed in my guest house. I talked to his mother on Zoom. And
My mother's probably online.
oh, she's probably online right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I leave it to Jalal. Here you are. Thank you so much. You need a seat.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anne, for the wonderful introduction and for giving me the opportunity to talk to a crowd that's so interested in the climate change subject. I will actually start with my family. This is me. Sorry, right there. So, second to the youngest in a family of 5. And surprise, surprise, 4 of us are engineers. My eldest sister opted a different career path. She is a management scientist. Genetically, siblings, I wanted to start with just my career trajectory and how I got interested in energy and climate change work, and how I started in Pakistan, and then Fulbright gave me the opportunity to pursue more energy and policy related work, which I'll be talking about more shortly. And I want to keep this conversation more two-way and free-flowing. That saves me a lot of, makes me less nervous, and has, more input from the crowd, makes me think more too, and which I appreciate. Three of us are millennials, 2 Gen X, born between 65 and 79. My elder sister, the electrical engineer one, is whom I've been following since we diverged paths after she went for a Ph.D. in engineering and I went for a Ph.D. in public policy. I had never really imagined that I would switch from engineering to policy, but just the way things panned out and the way my interests in energy and climate and technology kind of converged after my experience at USC, and then consequently my decision to pursue my PhD at the RAND Corporation. I find myself very privileged to have had those opportunities, and just having siblings who were always ambitious about their career aspirations, had a profound impact on my decision making, and I owe a lot to my mentors like Anne and people that I worked with back home in Pakistan. I'll go a little deeper in my career back in Pakistan as an electrical engineer. I was working for an oil and gas company for about 4.5, 5 years before I made this switch to renewable energy. And I'm happy that I did, and I'm always exploring, so I don't know what the future brings next. This is an exciting time, particularly for technologists and people interested in technology. The way technology has progressed over the past few decades is both a reason for optimism in terms of dealing with some of the existential challenges that we have, including climate change. And there is a reason for optimism, and obviously there's a need to have policy nudge incentives in the direction that they need to be nudged in order for us to make progress on climate change. So my Fulbright inspirations, I'll start with Muhammad Yunus, the founder of Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, who basically revolutionized the field of microfinance and small micro loans for farmers in Bangladesh primarily, and now that has panned into a huge field. He was a Fulbright scholar too. Sylvia Plath, poet, Pulitzer Prize winner, also a Fulbright scholar from back in 1955, and Muinuddin Qureshi, Prime Minister of Pakistan, former Prime Minister of Pakistan. So Fulbright really provides so many opportunities, and I feel like, cliched as it sounds, your net work is your net worth. And just having the privilege to be connected to people who were ambitious and thinking about problems that might not necessarily be affecting us right now, but have profound impacts on the way we live, and particularly for our future generations. And I think that kind of forward looking approach and thinking, and just the discussions that you have in that network of people changes the way, transforms literally the way you think. And so I'm happy for that opportunity. And I think it's important to acknowledge opportunities, because not everyone has similar level of access as some of us do. This is my friend Dr. Mohammad Moiz, who spearheaded COVID response in Pakistan in 2020, started the first drive-through testing facility in the remote province of Sindh in Pakistan, when drive-through testing was literally new even in places like California. He is another one of people who inspire me. So I'll go through a brief timeline of my trajectory, starting from 2010, when I did my electrical engineering, bachelor's in electrical engineering. I remember that I pursued engineering primarily because I had good grades, and engineering or medicine were pretty much the only options that I had back then. I worked as an electrical projects engineer with Exxon for about 4 years, working in electrical transmission, distribution at a power plant facility. After my first year, I think the learning curve for engineering is kind of flattens out after the first couple of years. And so I was looking for a break when my sister got a Fulbright scholarship, and she attended the University of Maryland in College Park back in 2012. And I remember that her calling me from Maryland and literally just asking me to prepare my application for Fulbright for the next year. I wasn't prepared at all, but I did, but I did not succeed in my first attempt. I tried again, and I got admitted at USC, like Anne mentioned. Fight on. 2014, 2015 was when I pursued my master's in energy systems. I also took a few courses in the policy school and the business school at USC, which was kind of my first exposure to technology policy. I found that experience really rewarding. I did an internship at the UNDP, and that was in 2015 when the Sustainable Development Goals agenda was being discussed and among member states of the UN, and that kind of nudged me more in the direction of public policy, and the fact that technical knowledge and science communication can make all the difference when we're discussing things like climate change. I went back to Pakistan after my master's in energy systems. I've mentioned that 2016-17 phase is mostly introspection, and it was exactly that. I was kind of in the phase where I was deciding on what to pursue, whether to stay in Pakistan or pursue a different career path. Unfortunately, at that time and even now, Pakistan did not really have a very well-established energy and environment focus in public policy. And so I decided to pursue my PhD. And that was thanks to the trip to Rand that I got connected with some people. Rob Lampert, who also attends St. Matthew's Church, was someone who was helpful in helping me decide what path would be best given my previous background. I was in touch with him before coming here. So right now I am in my 5th year pursuing my PhD in public policy. My dissertation focuses on the use of low-cost air quality sensing devices for particulate matter or PM pollution exposure. I'll talk briefly a little bit more about my exact research, but it's primarily looking at neighborhood level differences in exposure to particulate matter pollution. Oops. Okay, no. Actually, we are here. This is just situating you in the broader scheme of things. we are here, and this is one of my favorite clip from a talk by Carl Sagan. Pale Blue Dot is a must-read if you haven't come across Carl Sagan's work. I will play this. Actually, why don't we go ahead with the presentation? I'll play the video if we have time at the end. Sorry, I like to ramble a lot. I'm happy to answer any questions as they come about my career trajectory or anything that you want to interject. So I'm going to jump to the survey that I shared, and thank you very much to all those who filled out the survey. I got 20 responses. Looking at the crowd, that's more than a 50% response rate, which is great. And I'll share results and national averages to kind of situate ourselves. The good news is we are on the right path in terms of thinking about climate change and about its impacts in the future. But you can see how, so this was a question on describing climate change in one word. Even in a relatively homogeneous group such as this, we had some opposing kind of points of views about climate change. Someone called it an opportunity, and rightfully so. There were others who thought that this is more debatable and overblown, even though human errors and the catastrophic changes kind of seem to resonate with a lot more people. So I think it just goes on to show how different people would perceive climate differently, and there are confusions about conflating changing weather with changing climate. Climate is more long-term, generally over decades. Changing weather patterns are something different, but I think there's a need for all of us to kind of get the facts right on climate to begin with, and then to have discussions with people in our community and not be closed off even if we have differences in opinion. So climate change, IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, I will not bore you with the technical definition, but it's a change in the state of the Earth's climate that can be identified using statistical tests by changes in the mean value of different environmental variables like weather, like precipitation, incidence of rainfall, etc. So on the left side in green is what climate change is, and on the right side what climate change is not. It's both human and naturally produced warming. Scientists call it a threat multiplier because it multiplies threats such as food insecurity, global hunger, threats that we are already facing. Climate acts as a multiplier. We have seen that in Ukraine with the war. the Ukraine and Russia being supplying almost 30% of total global wheat exports, and the ripple down effects of the war on countries that are dependent on cereals, and those countries happen to be in some of the most vulnerable regions. So it ends up being everything being connected in some way, and the cascading effects of even things that we won't consider impactful have long-lasting effects. More importantly, climate discussions should be about values, social change, and the opportunities that we have to change these existing systems for the better, to change the way we produce, consume, and transport food, for example, given the realities that we are facing now. So it provides both risks that are alarming, sure, and there's scientific consensus on that, but at the same time, with the right policy levers and with the right set of incentives and trade-offs, we have the opportunity to change some of these ingrained systems that perpetuate inequities in society. It's not a story about the future. It's not at odds with religious beliefs. I have a few quotes from different religious denominations, all agreeing on doing better in terms of climate. And it's not an issue of debate in the scientific community. There's a 97% consensus on human-caused climate change. This chart shows how the atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, and carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas that traps heat in the atmosphere, and because of fossil fuel use, the concentration of carbon dioxide has increased dramatically, particularly since the Industrial Revolution. This chart shows an increase in parts per million of carbon dioxide from 1960 to 2020. The increase is from 320 parts per million to 420, which is about a 30% increase. But if you zoom out a little bit and you look at starting from the 18th century, pre-industrial revolution level carbon dioxide concentration and compare it to now, we are doing a lot of damage to the environment. This is correlated with temperature increases because carbon dioxide is a heat-trapping gas, and the more we produce carbon dioxide, the more we disrupt the natural carbon cycle, and the more temperature increases we experience. Yes, please.
I just wanted to ask about the curve. We saw curves like that with clothing. And when the curve starts to go up like that, it starts to really go up. Would that be the expectation from that kind of projection?
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for asking that. This is an exponential increase. It's not a linear increase, which is the major difference. And like the COVID incidence levels, we saw spikes that went up all the way to 150 to 200% of initial case levels. This is actually even worse because there's no downward spike, and you can't like just this graph doesn't show any decrease. What the Paris Accords and what the most ambitious climate goals are looking at is to contain that increase to within 1.5 Celsius of global mean temperatures. The increase in temperatures that we experience because of this exponential increase in carbon dioxide. The goal is to make it constant, not reduce it, because we're past that level. And I don't want to sound alarmist, but technologies do have the potential to drastically change our projections, and the way current models work is based on whatever available knowledge we have now. A revolutionary technology like carbon capture, battery storage advancements, moving away from lithium-ion batteries to another more energy-dense source of energy, would change the situation drastically, and that's kind of what makes me be more optimistic. And this is very different from the geologic pre-modern human fluctuations in weather patterns. Some people conflate those galactic ages with what we are experiencing now. But what we are experiencing now is directly attributable. There's actually an entire climate field called attribution science, which correlates human-caused climate with these changing temperature patterns. And the science is clear. Like the fossil fuels and our increased dependence on fossil fuels, even the US uses 70% from natural gas and oil-based energy generation. That huge dependence is responsible for the increase in carbon dioxide concentrations, and it impacts both countries and communities within the United States very differently. I'll go into some details on that, but the people who are contributing most are not the ones who are exposed most, which is a discrepancy in itself. And as a community of faith, I think it's important to think about these things more from a personal responsibility perspective, I believe. So moving on, what is climate risk? So this is the agreed upon definition of risk by the IPCC, the latest 5th assessment report on climate, which is based on consensus of scientists from the 195 member states of the UN, describes climate risk as a function of 3 variables: hazard, vulnerability to that hazard, and exposure to that hazard. So for example, if you look at the risk of wildfires, the vulnerability and exposure is not distributed equally. The most vulnerable places are actually those that are the least prepared, which makes the situation worse. So this chart shows it's a Facebook poll on how climate change will, the perceptions of different countries on how climate change will harm them, and it's clear that small island states and countries in Africa and South Asia, you can see India there with their extreme weather patterns and heat waves currently affecting food production. The people in those areas are the most concerned, which makes logical sense. In the US and Northern America generally, people are not as concerned as rest of the world, which is concerning. Moving on, like I said, exposure being one function of risk, we can see these dots represent coastal cities of more than 1 million people. So we have basically designed our cities in a way that we have prioritized living in coastal areas which are most prone to climate, and populations moving towards these coastal areas are actually exposing themselves more. In terms of vulnerability, I did this for a small perspective piece for RAND on how the Ukraine war would affect global hunger because of the interconnected supply chains and the disruption in cereals from Ukraine and Russia, and the ripple down effects of disruption in international trade from the Black Sea in general. So these are some of the famines since 1990, and you can see amongst the causes, climate has, since 1990 in particular, acted as a threat multiplier to already existing economic inequalities governance structures that are not prepared to deal with this threat. So as a threat multiplier, climate change is obviously an important consideration. So in terms of climate effects and exposure, this is a website that gives you an assessment based on currently available data in a 1.5 Celsius world. Me, as a 34-year-old, will experience, and a 1.5 Celsius world is assuming that we achieve the targets that we have voluntarily set for ourselves according to the Paris Agreement. That would be a 1.5 Celsius change. What climate scientists are projecting is more along the lines of a 2 Celsius change by end of the century when you compare global mean temperatures from the pre-industrial levels, from 1990 levels to the future. So wildfires 1.5 times, river floods 1.8 times, crop failures 2.5 times, and heat waves, which we are experiencing now, more than 13 times of what we experience. I'm sorry, this is a gloomy picture, but it is what it is. I think understanding these things would help us prepare better for the future. And this chart on the right shows how these states, California, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Oregon, Texas, and Washington are exposed to all 5 major climate hazards: extreme heat, drought, wildfires, inland floods, coastal flooding. And you can see how Florida, as an example, is also the least prepared of these impacts that we are seeing now and that would exacerbate in the future. What makes me optimistic about California is the fact that our policy making is not influenced as much by public opinion as it is by science. So this is the result of the survey that we just did. We had about 20 responses, so thank you for that. The gray bars show our group's data, and the bars on the right show data from the national estimates. As you can see, more than 90% of the group here is alarmed or concerned, and rightfully so, about the impacts of climate change. And this is based on a Yale climate communication survey. They carry out this survey every year across a representative population of the US and compare people's perceptions. And I think it's perceptions and the conversations that we have in our communities that eventually have the biggest impact on policy making. And so it's imperative and it's important to continue having those conversations, even if it's across party divides, across religious divides, across some of the ingrained thinking that people have, and just try to educate at least whoever is in our immediate ambit, be it our family or our community. Volunteering is also a great way to kind of get more involved. And it's what's alarming here is that amongst national estimates, we still have more than about a quarter of the population that is either on the disengaged or even dismissive side of the spectrum. And it's not to say that you alienate people who don't think like you, but I think I think keeping the conversation going, and once people experience impacts personally, that makes them change their perspective, and there's research to back that. On the bright side, the opinions on the political and climate views on whether global warming is happening now, which by the way scientists have a 97% consensus on, have been trending in a positive direction. So the percentage of Americans who believe in global warming happening now has been increasing, particularly amongst the liberal and more independent or non-leaning people. What's surprising here, and what was surprising here to me, was even amongst progressive liberal Democrats, there's a the perception of climate has kind of tapered since the past couple of years. But I do think overall, just the fact that we have more conservative and moderate people believing in climate impacts, and if you look at the other factors too, it is good to see that at least some of the immediately felt impacts of climate are making a difference in terms of how people perceive climate change impacts. Sure.
Thank you. Am I reading it correctly to say that in 2008, I'm just choosing the conservative Republicans for a moment because I want to focus on that part. 50% saw this as a problem, and in a few years later, 2010, only 32%. Is that true?
Yeah, that's.
And that's also true with the
with the independent or non-leaning.
So why is it that there was a drop? And actually, it's in every single one of your charts at the beginning. What happened in that period of time that caused so many people to lose their sense of concern?
That's a great question, and I don't have an answer to that. It's hard to figure out causal factors on people's perceptions, but the trends in terms of actual extreme weather events are pretty clear. Since the past decade, extreme weather patterns, category 3 to category 5 cyclones, and most natural phenomena have actually worsened over the past decade. So one would assume that if people were consuming the right information, your perceptions would also about climate change would also trend more towards believing that it is happening. But unfortunately, there's misinformation. There's political differences in political opinion, which are the hardest to disentangle. We have anchoring biases, all sorts of cognitive biases that make us still skeptical. But I look at the last 3 to 4 years, and I see a positive trend there. Which means despite like even if you look at 2016, 2014 onwards, the conservative views during the Trump presidency, which was all about weakening the EPA and weakening a lot of the climate regulations that we already had, the public perception improved about the impacts of climate. Yes, please.
Do your numbers indicate the percentages of those who believe there is global warming but have skepticism as to the cause? I think many people believe there's global warming, but we begin to separate when we're focusing on why. And we look back over millions of years and we see substantial climate change for various reasons. And we try to understand what are those reasons and why are they not operative now? What percentage are humans causing it versus these other factors that have been around for millennium.
Thanks. There is actually a question, and this is not my data, just to be clear. This is based on a climate survey that the Yale program on climate change communication conducts of a representative sample of American adults 18 plus every year. To your question of the perceptions on human-caused climate, I do not have the graph. This graph just charts whether people believe global warming is happening or not. Whether or not it's natural caused or human caused is not reflected in this particular chart. But if you select the human caused, if you go to the Yale Climate Communications website and select the human caused tab on the right, you'll actually see an increase across partisan divide on the fact that human-caused activities like fossil fuel burning is causing climate change, and there's consensus among scientists on that too. The trends look actually people do believe that it's human-caused, but they might not necessarily be on the same page about the extent of global warming. On the positive side, Pope Francis's teachings about global warming and their impact changed to a significant degree people's perceptions on whether global warming is happening. So in 2015, the Pope came out very vocal after the Sustainable Development Goals were agreed upon on climate change and our role in changing the Earth's ecosystem and what we can do and what we have a moral and social responsibility to do to combat climate. And that caused a lot of people to change their perspectives, even if they were strongly held beliefs prior to the Pope coming out on climate change. I thought this was interesting, and then this is just quotations from the three of the Abrahamic religions, a rabbinic letter on climate crisis on the left, the Islamic Declaration on Global Climate Change at the top, and then Pope Francis's quote on climate, and the Dalai Lama. So I like the Dalai Lama's quote the best. Since climate change and the global economy now affect us all, we have to develop a sense of the oneness of humanity. So I think in terms of the opportunities that someone mentioned, it's a great chance for us to finally come together on some issue and do what we can in our respective communities. I was pleasantly surprised a couple months back when someone from the mosque that I visit in Culver City was discussing investing in water conservation and energy conservation and having a leadership in energy and environmental design certification for the mosque. I thought that would be a first, and that was really, I really appreciated the way they were thinking on conservation. Sorry. Oops. I think we have a disruption here, which I should be able to do without Jeremiah's support. Maybe. Is this on the USB?
Oh, you got, okay. Want to play that video?
No, just resume the presentation if I can. I had a few more slides. Have the USB, so.
Yeah, that's.
Sorry about this. Maybe some food for thought. see that. Sure. Yeah, thank you. All right, sorry. Um, where were we? Yeah, so this was a recent poll by the LA Times um, and UC Berkeley on areas of importance it's also based on a survey of a representative population in California and the areas that we find the most important. Homelessness is, not surprisingly, the top, crime and public safety, housing affordability, and then fourth is climate change. Sorry, this was a survey within LA County for the recent mayoral race. And people, a lot of the mayoral candidates did not even have climate change in their agenda, which was very surprising to me. Karen Bass and Rick Caruso, they had homelessness and crime and public safety and housing affordability, which are indeed key issues, but no real mention of climate change, even though and part of it is because it's something that is too distant in the future, or the assumption is that it's too distant. People don't tend to take that as seriously. And the fact that you cannot see the immediate impacts of changing weather patterns, even though they have global consequences, we kind of discount the risk of climate-related impacts. And I would argue that climate changes would exacerbate homelessness and exacerbate these issues that we already have. Anyways, enough of pessimism and some facts around climate. There is reason to be hopeful. I believe that we are in a transition period, switching from fossil fuels to sustainable energy. And advances in battery storage, in renewables, in energy efficiency, in carbon capture and storage, and all those technologies would eventually reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, which are the greatest source of carbon pollution. I was reading a recent article in some researchers at Stanford came up with transparent solar panels that would fit windows like windows over here and have almost the same level of efficiency as photovoltaic panels. So imagine having that, incentivizing industry to improve those kinds of technologies and having cleaner sources of energy that are that make a significant dent in our consumption of fossil fuels. Sorry, this is a kind of a complicated drawing, but what it shows is that people adopt technology faster today compared to, let's say, 100 years back. If you go on the extreme left of this chart, you have telephone, electricity, radio, and adoption of these technologies over time. And you see that people, technology adoption follows what we call an S curve. There are early adopters, and then there's majority adoption until you have 100% of people adopting a particular technology. But if you look at the extreme right of the chart, you see cell phones, internet, computers, all of these technologies having a relatively quick take-up by people. And so there's reason to hope that some silver bullet technologies or breakthrough technologies in energy, which people are actually working on now, would like autonomous cars or electric vehicles, that California plans to have a significant fleet of its current population of vehicles replaced by electric vehicles by 2045. So those are things that would create a huge impact. I will skip the video and move forward. And talk a little bit more about my work. Sorry about this. Yeah, the last part of my presentation is just about my work at RAND. I'll quickly go through it and then we'll open it up to have your questions. Sorry, Jeremiah, I might need your help again. The video? No, just the presentation. It turned off.
It's downloads.
Okay. Yeah. Well. So I'm primarily, my dissertation is in the tech and narrative lab at the RAND Corporation. The lab currently has 4 major categories of technologies that we are working on: AI, machine learning, AR and VR technology, digital gaming, and the Internet of Things. I'm focused more on the last 2, digital gaming and Internet of Things technologies. What you see on the right is me putting up a low-cost air quality sensor that we eventually deployed across zip codes in Santa Monica and Pittsburgh to capture neighborhood level air quality levels across Santa Monica and Pittsburgh. There are a lot of opportunities in these are some of the other projects that I've been involved in at RAND, from cybersecurity to hyperlocal air quality tools to gamifying or visualizing complex systems and the use of emerging technologies. This is a very rudimentary carbon dioxide monitor that we created initially as a prototype, and then we kind of converted it into a product that we could deploy, a 3D printed casing and some sensors put together help you measure really granular levels of particulate matter and carbon dioxide pollution that vary a lot by the zip code you're living in. And there are, like I was talking to some of you before, there are huge differences in exposure versus consumption across zip codes. Minority communities, Black and Hispanic communities are way more exposed to particulate matter pollution than relatively richer demographics, even in California. And I think these technologies actually help you at a very low cost quantify those differences, and that's a first step towards creating policies that would reduce this unequal burden of pollution on minority communities. And you can extrapolate that argument globally. For a country like Pakistan, we cannot afford multiple $1 million monitors to evaluate air quality that the US can afford. But these low-cost sensors actually, when we compare data, and I have a chart on that, we deployed these sensors, by the way, in Santa Monica, Pittsburgh, and a small town in Sitka, Alaska, to compare differences in pollution. This is me and my fellow in Sitka. It was a wonderful experience. And this is a chart kind of conceptualizing the preliminary findings from my dissertation research. The orange line that you have are EPA monitors tracking carbon pollution, and the blue line with multiple spikes is the low-cost sensors that we deployed, and they correlate, as you can see, pretty strongly with the EPA monitors, meaning that at a fraction of a cost, with advances in technology, you can accurately measure neighborhood level pollution profiles. So this is ongoing research, and I'd love to talk more, but I think we are on time. What we can do: consume less, track your carbon footprint, and compare. I was surprised by my higher than average footprint when I used a freely available carbon tracker. Volunteer for a climate nonprofit. Number 4, fight propaganda by inquiring and educating yourself and having open conversations. And number 5th, and most important, is to remember to vote and hold elected officials responsible. Thank you. Yes, please. I'm happy to open it up and have. So there's an online calculator actually published. I have the link up here, but I can share the link. I don't exactly remember what the URL is, but I can share it over email. What it does is it asks you about your like the miles you travel on average in a day, over a week, the amount of energy you consume, your zip code where you live. That impacts a lot on where your energy is sourced. But then it compares your footprint versus your neighbors versus your larger community versus the global average footprint. It's pretty sobering if you think about it. Yes, please.
Great to know your carbon footprint, but what can we as individuals do?
What was the question?
The question is, it's great to track and measure your footprint, but what can you do as an individual to?
Ask how many people have solar panels.
Yeah, solar is always a sort of a controversial topic because it eliminates the haves and have-nots divide that we have. What you can do is, I think the most important thing is to inquire, educate, and explain to other people. The 3 E's, as I call them. Look at whatever available evidence we have, and there's a ton. And then with kids, movies are a great way to kind of have an easier way to consume scientific information. And I think a lot of the onus is on the scientific community to make the message such that it's palatable to people and it's not shrouded in numbers and stuff, which I'm probably guilty of doing today. Yes, Tracy. Sorry.
Eating less meat.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Changing dietary patterns is probably the hardest thing to do. It has an absolutely big, agriculture contributes more than between 15 to 20%. Fact check me on that, but the last figure I saw was 15 to 20% of global footprint is due to the agriculture industry. And meat consumption in Northern America and Europe is way higher than, for example, Asia and Africa. But yeah, I think looking at your consumption, whether it's meat or whether it's changing dietary patterns is important. Yes.
Could you comment briefly on carbon capture and obtaining energy from nuclear fusion, are those pies in the sky, or are they, do you think they're actually going to happen?
So carbon capture and storage, and just for everyone, carbon capture simply means we deploy technologies that extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and convert it into non-environmentally polluting byproducts. I haven't really looked at the literature on that, but I won't call it pie in the sky, but there are efforts for carbon capture technologies to scale. I think the right incentive structures and the right policies are what are needed. When you really look at climate as an existential issue, it should become a national security problem, and anything that becomes a national security problem kind of sees profound changes in technology. Nuclear is also another, like nuclear waste is a big issue, but it makes sense in certain parts of the world to have more nuclear than say have more coal. France is a useful example of how safe nuclear provides a lot of the base load requirements that renewable or intermittent sources of energy really don't. Yes. Well, I think the question was on the real safety-related issues for nuclear power generation. I think when you look at the life cycle causes, the life cycle impacts of nuclear, the biggest impact is in safe disposal of nuclear waste. Nuclear waste is radioactive. It stays whether it's dumped underground, it stays in the ecosystem for centuries because the decay of nuclear waste is over a much longer time period. But there are different points of view on nuclear depending on where you're talking about. Situating a nuclear power plant on a fault line is clearly not a good idea. Situating it closer to sources of cooling, like near bodies of water, makes sense.
Can you make a quantitative comparison between quantities of, say, heat and quantities of waste?
I think what you're alluding to is probably what we call life cycle impact assessments. So comparing, let's say, a technology like nuclear with natural gas, and looking at the overall life cycle impacts of nuclear versus natural gas, and that's a lot of the work I do is actually around that. On using models to quantify from source extraction of natural gas, whether it's by fracking or by more environmentally responsible ways, to transport of natural gas to its actual use, to final disposal of natural gas-based generation sources, and a lot of preconceived notions would either get debunked or approved based on what the stats say on a life cycle impact assessment. And these are huge exercises, multiple years to get the right data to make an informed choice on benefit costs.
Jalal, thank you so much. Our time is actually passed over, but I'm sure Jalal would love to hang around and talk to any of you who care to continue.
Yeah.
Some of us have to go, but I know that we have a presentation from Bob Harder of something that you can't, now that Ramadan is over, you can consume. Jalal has been celebrating Eid this week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.